Hi.
Nice to meet you.
Good to meet you.
I'm the senator from the North Country.
The North Country.
There's snow on the ground.
Berlin?
That's my district.
I knocked on doors
58
in Berlin in
communities.
1984.
Yeah, so you were up there for Gary Hart.
I was, and I was scared to death, and I stood on the corner, my knees shaking for a half
So you
hour.
weren't there when you did the act?
I wasn't there. I was in Iowa by
Oh,
then.
okay, yeah.
But I came up over Columbus weekend and knocked on doors in Berlin.
Yeah.
And I stood on
It
the
doesn't
corner, as
snow
nervous as
anymore.
could be. It took me a half hour to get up the nerve to knock on the first.
Nicest people in the world.
I'd never done it before. I'd done lots of lip drops, but I hadn't actually knocked on.
That the DGA invested in Maggie's campaign. And we owe that all to the decisions made by Governor O'Malley. And so we want to thank you for letting us do the good things that the legislature has been able to do.
Very grateful that you took the time on a beautiful Saturday away from your families and work and other things to come and sit with me. And Ray, thank you so much for your invitation to come up and speak tonight. And over the following 10 years, Baltimore achieved the biggest reduction in crime of any major city in America. The city's doing much better now. Our schools are moving in the right direction, though we still have a lot more progress to make. But we stumbled kind of backwards, really, into a new way of leadership. It was not the sort of old patronage-driven, ideological, top-down, hierarchical, bureaucratic way of big cities in the past. In our time together this evening, I wanted to talk with you about the story of us, about the story of Baltimore and New Hampshire, of Maryland and America. It was 14 years ago this month that I was elected mayor of Baltimore. Baltimore had by that year sadly become the most violent, most addicted, and most abandoned city in America. At one of the very first community meetings that we organized after the election, and I'll never forget, a little girl came up to one of the microphones and she said this. She said, "Mr. Mayor, my name is Amber, and I am 12 years old. And because of all of the addicted people and all of the drug dealers in my neighborhood, there are people in the newspaper who call my neighborhood Zombie Land. And I want to know if you know they call my neighborhood Zombie Land. And I want to know if you're doing anything about it." You see, there was a big difference at that time between the Baltimore that we carried in our hearts and the Baltimore that we saw in our headlines. Now, like Baltimore in 1999, we, as Americans, are going through a cynical time of disbelief. We seem to have lost that shared conviction we once had, that we actually have the ability to make things better, and we have the ability to do it together. There is a big difference, isn't there, between the America that we carry in our hearts and the America that we see too often in our headlines. The America we carry in our hearts is that land where anybody who works hard, who plays by the rules, who gets up early in the morning can make a better future for themselves and their children. But the America in our headlines is too often a place where corporate profits are now higher than ever, the rich are richer than ever, but the paychecks of working families keep shrinking over time. The America in our hearts remains that nation that created the greatest and strongest middle class in the history of the world. The America in our headlines is a nation where too many kids can't afford to go to college, and too many college graduates can't find jobs after college. I don't know about you, but I've had enough of the cynicism. I've had enough of the apathy. I've had enough of us giving in to self-pitying, small solutions, and low expectations of one another. The stronger we make our country, the more she gives back to us and to our children and to our grandchildren. You know, I am joined tonight by my son, of whom I am very, very proud. His name is William. He is 16. And I would remember very distinctly when he was about 9 years old. We found ourselves at home watching a History Channel special, and it was about Rosa Parks. and civil rights and the Montgomery bus boycott. And as William watched the story, he turned to me and he said, "Hey, Dad, back then, somebody told you that some of you had to ride in the front of the bus and some of you had to ride in the back of the bus? And you guys actually listened?" And I said, "Well, it's hard to imagine, but honestly, pal, that was just the way it had always been." And then he turned to me with the clear wisdom of youth. And he said, "Dad, didn't you guys realize that you were all going to the same place?" The truth is, we're all going to the same place. And we're all on the same bus. It only takes one person, then another, and then another to stand up and say, "Enough. Enough finger pointing, enough obstruction, enough wasted time. Let us achieve like Americans again. Let us lead like Americans again. Let us believe like Americans again. In ourselves, in our nation, and in one another. Together we can, together we must, and together we will." God bless you, New Hampshire.